Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And I am so delighted to have my dear friend, best friend, longtime co-collaborator, founder of this company, our president, Mark Powers, join us today. I've been trying to get Mark onto the podcast for over a year. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steve. I'm looking forward to this.
So you say now, it's taken me a year to get you on this podcast. You
Well,
keep
we
saying
have had a few distractions.
we've had a few distractions. Yeah, we've had a few things in the way. So I asked you to come on the podcast because you have worked with a lot of lawyers on building a great practice. And one of the things that you and I have had countless discussions on are how to build that practice to maximize it as an asset to create a great income stream for a lawyer. And one of the things that we've also looked at is, and it's sloppily called, sometimes we call it succession planning, sometimes we call it exit planning, sometimes we call it transition planning, sometimes we call it selling a practice. But you've done a lot of work in this area. You've helped a lot of lawyers in this area. And I just want to get you to come on and talk for a few minutes about your perspective as a guy who's been coaching, advising clients for 30 years on how to build a
Almost
great
35,
practice.
but who's counting?
Yeah, almost 35. See, you look so young to me. I
Yeah,
don't
I
want to
know.
say 35.
I know. Yeah, but you're right. We have seen in that time, both you and I have seen people come through the various stages of their practice all the way to the point where they're going to the next phase of their life and they're transitioning their practice. They want to exit, they want to sell it, they want to transition it to somebody else. So I've seen all of that. And as you know, some of it's been good, some of it's been bad, and some of it's been plain ugly. But I will say, when we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly with this, when you look out into the general population, and when I say general population of lawyers, those are not in the Atticus community, that they're really going by the seat of the pants. And the most common strategy for leaving the practice is what? It's dying at the desk. They keep doing it. They have to do it. They build something that's totally dependent on them. Their identity is connected to it. And I don't mean to be flippant about that, but it's true. There's a lot of law firms that the attorneys are just dying at their desk, and they have a lot of reasons. And some of it is just the stress in running as complicated business as a law firm is. So we have seen a lot.
So
Yeah.
spend a few minutes and talk to me about why you think
Two
that's
things, Steve. We stepped over one there, though. In your term strategy, we stepped over one. Is that when you start thinking about it, right? Is that this is something? This is not an event that happens when you're in your 60s. This is ongoing, and you start whenever, early as you can, thinking about how I get this to an asset that can transition or sell. There's a great quote about succession planning. It says it's like picking out a spare tire for your car. You hope you never need it. Excuse me. But when you do, you really wish you had invested in a better one. And eventually you're going to need it, right? So this is the same with succession. You've got to invest in the thinking and the time to do it. You don't want to be at a place, in what you're saying, Steve, is you don't want to play a place where you're out of runway and you got to land the plane, or you've run out of money or fuel and you have to land the plane, right? You've got to have the fuel, and this has got to be one of the many assets. So if I talk on that part of it, Steve, if I speak to it, what you and I do with our business is we love it. We love working in it. That's first. We enjoy it, but we also know that it's an asset for us and that it has to yield a return. And the idea is, when you and I are not even in it, it's still got to be able to produce that return. So we're thinking about it. We've done, both of us, and I think most people on this, I hope, have done some good financial planning, because that makes succession a lot easier. There's no desperation. You can see it's an asset. You can figure out where it fits in your portfolio. but it's not going, I wouldn't find yourself in a position that I'm desperate to sell the firm because it's nothing works when you're trying to sell a firm that way or sell anything that way. Desperation smells.
Now let's stay right there for a second because of all the cases where I saw and worked with a successful internal successor buying the practice. In none of those situations did I see the attorney who sold the practice, like the founding attorney, successfully sneak up on a young associate and surprise them. In each one of the successful acquisitions by a young lawyer, it was identified and communicated to that young lawyer that they were a successor, and the successor path was laid out. The financial commitment was clear, the timeline was clear, and like you said, the financial commitment might be 1%, 2% ownership, but there was a financial commitment. So it was a beyond verbal promise. It was like, "Okay, we're gonna commit, you're buying in." There's some complexity there. Just like you said, you need to have one of our practice advisors. You need to have somebody who understands how to guide you through this process, and that quickly and
Absolutely.
easily.
Absolutely.
Yeah, quickly and easily is a shortcut to have someone who's done this before, obviously,
So
so
I'm not, so the other thing that works in that, if you're talking about what works in that model, is if you're going to do it, bring them to your training. Let's assume you're already in the Atticus community, which if you say you're in that community, you're working on the practice, you're building a great practice, you bring that successor with you to start training them because you may not be the best one to train them. And you stay with them for a while, get them a coach, get them a process for understanding and learning the business, because what you're investing is in insurance that more than likely most of these deals are paid out over time. Rarely do you get the whole thing up front, and you need them to be able to operate that business. So you're still going to be connected, but you want to make sure they're being trained and they have people that can make sure the business stays successful. So I'm going to say that while that's a very often recommended solution to transition succession planning, it's not mine. I won't go into what mine is yet, but that's not it because it's so fraught with problems. A little bit better option can be for some people, and other people have had a success. This just isn't used as often. Is there's I'm going to say this word. I don't think it's exactly right, Steve, but it's a little bit of a merger. So there's two ways to do this. It's finding a young person that already runs and owns their law firm. And you already know they've got the drive, the energy, they're excited. They wouldn't be doing it and they've made some mistakes. And you bring them in some form of merger partnership to be able to work together with the intention of transitioning the practice to them. So they know what they're coming into, and it looks to the outside world like a merger or a partnership, and it still can be a small firm you're doing this with. But then over time, you phase out, but you know you've got a candidate that understands what they're working on because they've been running a firm. So that's one form of a merger. The other is, so this is almost like I'm out of runway merger. Is later in my career, I can merge with a firm and bring my business with me and be of counsel over time with them. But I can, we've seen many terms or many firms start merging in their assets to this firm and being able to get paid out over time from that firm for the business that stays with them. It's a model, but it's not my favorite, but that works as well. So there's merger as another model.
Mark, I'm gonna just stop right there for a second.
Yeah.
And I hate to go into the weeds for a moment, but for people that are listening to this, one of the reasons Mark recommends the merger model is discussed a lot by our consultants and coaches, is the ABA model rule 1.17, which in Florida would be 4.4-1.17, which basically addresses that if you're going to sell a practice, you have to do written disclosure to all clients. So this is why you see, but if you do a merger and then you merge and then sell, you don't have to follow this written disclosure rule. And so this is kind of a well-known strategy among people that do this all the time. So as you're listening to this, the merger is usually a third-party transaction over time. Now, that's how I sold my practice. It was a merger, and then my partners bought me out. It wasn't a straight sell. So as you're listening to this and you're scratching your head going, okay, what's my long-term strategy? Rarely do you see a third-party purchase because of, and you can Google it and I can put it in the show notes, the ABA Rule 1.17. Most jurisdictions follow the same ethical rule. So you'll see most of the acquisitions are really called mergers, but they're ultimately a buyout of one partner over time.